Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's Storytime with Meshla. For those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Meshla. You can call me Mesh, Meshla, Meshi, Meshla, any of the above. I will answer to any of them. If you know me outside of Twitch, please do not use my first name for security reasons. I appreciate that. And welcome in for anybody who's new. Tonight we are continuing reading the story that I'm calling Train Your Daughter for short, or TYD because people are weird. It is the shortened version of a Mandalorian proverb, which roughly translates as train your sons to be strong, but train your daughters to be stronger. So I shorten it to train your daughter, and people have gone weird. So yeah. I would suggest that you have drinks, snacks, a blanket, and perhaps some tissues. Just saying. I have tissues, but that's mainly because I have a runny nose. So if you see me blowing my nose, that's why. But I would recommend having tissues this evening. Yes. Okay. Yes, tissues are recommended. I'm not going to say why, but recommended. Alright. Also, are you sure, Rafe? Anyway, so we are continuing this evening with chapters 22 to 24 of Train Your Daughter. The last time I was reading, which was the day before Thanksgiving, we got all the way through, chapter 21, yeah. Sorry, brain is like completely fried all of a sudden. Because I went off of my normal schedule because it was the day before Thanksgiving, and I decided that having cozy story time would be a really good idea because I know that there's a lot of people in my community, but also in general, that may not be able to spend time with their families during the holidays for various reasons. So I wanted to provide a comfy, cozy place for people to hang out. Actually, no, I started editing with chapter 23, right? I'm actually going to read chapter 21, unless I'm wrong. Did I read chapter 22 last time? I don't think I did. I think I was editing chapter 23. It's fine. Also, my voice is still a little scuffed, so just be aware. Also, I can't... My hand-eye coordination is absolutely terrible for whatever reason. Also, can somebody do the command mesh in chat for me, please? It's just mesh. One word. It's exclamation point mesh. There you go. Sorry, I'm not fancy, I don't have sounds, but there you go. Command is active. So that command became a thing because during the first 12 days of December, I was taking part in a fundraiser for the Starlight Children's Foundation, and I had various milestones where, you know, if we reached a certain point, I would do specific things. So, let me find the list, actually, because there's quite a list. So, let's see. Just to give you guys a little bit of background before I start reading. Here we go. So, Starlight Children's Foundation, for those who don't know, is an organization that helps raise money and awareness to provide children who are in the hospital for long-term treatment for things such as cancer or other illnesses, to provide them with, sorry, my camera's being a doofus, to provide them with toys and games and an opportunity to be a kid. This can be through virtual reality games, the Starlight Gaming Station, various other things, crafts, toys. So as part of that campaign, I teamed up with the Survivor Squad, which is a stream team and community which I am part of, and together we as a team raised over $5,000 for Starlight. I personally raised $350 with the help from my community, so thank you so much for all of that wonderful help. So for the milestones, I did some kind of small ones because it was my first fundraiser. So when we hit $10, we did a Blue Sky post about the fundraiser. Blue Sky is a social media platform somewhat similar to Twitter or X, but I don't have a Twitter account anymore, so I have a Blue Sky account. So I posted on there. When we hit $25, I added a new chapter of my story. When we passed our $50 milestone, so chat came up with the chat command that we just had. I did a poll in Discord, and that's what they came up with. We can edit the wording if you guys want. I just thought it would be silly because I'm very well known for going the wrong way and doing silly things, and I freely admit that. So I am not a pro gamer by any means. I just have fun. For $75, which we also passed like a freight train, I got to dye my hair. There are pictures of that in the Discord. It was purple for a few days anyway. We kind of touched on 100 and 150 because we actually blasted all the way to 230. 100 was pick a game for me to play, and 150 was I get to play a game with chat. I have not specifically done the playing a game with chat. That's still up for grabs if people want to do that. I do have some stipulations about what games I will play, but willing to do co-op games of various descriptions to kind of hang out with chat a little bit. And I completely skipped all the way to 300 because we completely blew any kind of $200 milestone out of the water. So our $300 milestone was for Mr. Wraith Valak, who is one of my awesome mods, to spend an entire stream and not make a single sarcastic remark. And he succeeded. So I gotta give him major props for that. I know, you missed the purple hair, I'm sorry. It was really fun. I can always re-dye it. It was a temporary dye. It's really easy to do. I just don't want to do it on stream because it's messy. And then for $350, which was the milestone that we reached with our fundraiser, I will create and play a Twitter character of chat's choice. What that means is that you get to pick the gender, you get to pick the race, you get to pick the hairstyle, the color, the eye color. You get to pick what they look like. And the name if you want to. So my next SWTOR stream is going to be... Oh, I think that's supposed to be Christmas Day. I will get back to you on the stream for that week. It may happen the day before, it may happen the day after. Actually, not the day before. We'll see. I'll let you know. Because that is Christmas Day. I don't know quite yet what family plans are for Christmas. I don't know if we're going down on Christmas Day or if we're just going down Christmas Eve. Sounds like Christmas Eve. So it may still happen. I'll let you know as soon as I know. And we didn't reach these milestones, but just for your information, our $400 milestone was for me to co-author one chapter of a Star Wars fanfiction. I'm actually already working with someone on co-authoring some fanfictions and giving them some writing coaching. For $450, if we reached it, I would help level one SWTOR character. And if we had reached $500, I would have co-authored 2 chapters of Star Wars fan fiction. I'm also going to kind of touch on some of the incentives as well. A lot of my incentives were pretty attainable. I tried to keep them really low because I know a lot of people, especially this time of year, may not have a lot of extra money. Trying to save for money for presents for their kids, that kind of thing. So I tried to keep a lot of my incentives pretty low and pretty attainable. So my incentives, starting at $1, you could unlock a special Discord role of Stream for Starlight supporter. Several people did unlock that role by making donations. You could also spend $1 and tell me to drink water, because I don't. Oh no. And then for $3, you could have told me to check my posture, because as you can tell right now, I'm slouching. That's also a points redeem on the channel too, so you could do it either way. And for $5, you could, as part of the fundraiser, you could have me put a bow in my hair, and I did that. I had like 5 in my hair at one point. That was pretty cool. I didn't get any clips of that, so next time I do a fundraiser, please feel free to clip the heck out of it. Okay? Please. And then and these were for specific donation amounts. For $25, if somebody donated I skipped one. For $10, we for every specific $10 donated, we would add $10 to stream. I got at least one of those. For a $25 donation, I would swap character or loadout if I was gaming. For $50, the person who donated $50 could ask me anything about the stream or my content here on Twitch. For $75, I would stop for the next stream or whatever, I would do a one-shot. For those who are unfamiliar with writing or fan fiction, a one-shot is a story that is self-contained. It can be related to the ongoing story that the person is working on. It can be completely separate. It can be a brand new character. It could be all kinds of things. So that would have been interesting to do. For anybody who donated $100 or more, they unlocked VIP status on the channel for 1 year. And I did have one person donate $150, which actually pushed us over my initial goal. I had one person donate $150, which unlocked for them some one-on-one writing coaching with me. So I'm still sorting out the details of that, but that's what they donated $150 to do. So, and it goes to a great cause. Because we didn't, because people weren't donating to specific items, which they could, the money kind of goes into a general fund and it gets dispersed to wherever it's needed the most. If people had donated and picked specific things when they were checking out, they could unlock like some game time on the Starlight Gaming Station, or some VR, or comfy hospital gowns for the kids. There was a whole bunch of specific different things that were specific to the charity and not things that I had added. So really cool stuff. If you guys want to check out Starlight, let me actually go turn that command back on, because I turned it off like a dingus. Turn it off. Let me find it. Turned it off like a dingus. Alright. There we go. So, but yes, if you guys would like to learn more about Starlight, you can use the command in chat, which I'm actually going to type for you. It's ! Starlight. You can learn a little bit more about their organization and what they do. They do at least 2 campaigns throughout the year. I'm probably going to pick up in December like I did this year, because I really had fun. It was my first fundraiser, so it was a bit overwhelming, but I really enjoyed it, and I definitely wanted to do it again. I think it's a great cause to support. Alright, that's a little bit enough of me being a talking head, but I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what I've been doing for the last 2 weeks or so. It's been pretty busy. So yeah, Alright, I'm going to move my screens around a little bit. I do have a secondary screen, so if you see me looking off to the left, it's just to check Stream Chat and OBS to make sure it's functional. I do also have closed captioning running through OBS, so let me know if that's working for you guys. It's something new that I'm trying. I've tried it a couple different ways, and I have found that the way that I'm doing it now is actually very nice because it actually outputs a text file of the closed caption, so if I want to edit them, I can, which is fantastic. Alright. Also, if I'm not loud enough, please let me know. I'm trying not to spike my mic with my voice being all scuffed. Alright, give me 1 sec. Goodness. Okay. Alright, sorry, I got super sidetracked for a second. Alrighty. I'm gonna turn the music down just a little bit. It's kind of jazzy chill hop. Hope you guys enjoy. Just wanted something soothing, something relaxing, because we're here to listen to stories, at least tonight anyway. So, alright. Okay. Chapter 22. The doors opened slowly as Jarius entered the outer courtyard of the Praxium and dropped his pack off his shoulder. He looked around the courtyard and everything looked just as it did when he had headed out months ago. But there was a different feeling about the place now. He was about to ask one of the caretakers who helped maintain the grounds as he swept the leaves off the walkway until he spotted Marin coming out of the students' quarters. She shaded her eyes as she looked out into the late afternoon sun, and then she saw him. She hadn't seen him in months. Her hands flew to her mouth, and then she sprinted across the courtyard. Mere seconds later, she was swallowed in a hug as his strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her to his chest. She couldn't stop the tears, but they were tears of joy. "Buir, I missed you," she said softly, her voice muffled against his tunic. "I missed you too," he said with a grin as he spun her around. "I know I've been away for too long." She giggled and clung to him. He hadn't done that since she was little. "Where were you?" she asked, her hand clutching unconsciously at the ever-present tags around her neck. "Here and there," he said as he knelt. "Dylan's sister-in-law must have been impressed with the security detail I ran for her a while ago from how her manager acted when he presented my paycheck. But I'll be honest, I'm not sure security details are something I'd want to handle again." Marin frowned. "Why not?" She remembered Bran mentioning that during their visit to the Darha school. "What happened?" she asked, clutching his hand as if she never wanted to let go, her other hand still clutching at his tags. "Nothing happened, per se," he told her as he got up and they started to walk around. "But leading a detail, you have to keep your eyes open to everything in a different way than normal. I've been more used to being a hunter than a protector, but I guess that helped me keep an eye out for anyone who might have wanted to harm her. At any rate," he said as he stopped and looked at her, "you sure are gripping the tags I left with you, and I'm sensing a different feeling about the Praxium now. What's been going on here?" Marin flushed slightly and grinned, wishing for a moment that Jared was about, but he was off training with Master Card. "Well," she paused and pulled him over to sit on one of the benches under a large tree. "Do you remember the festival that Edmonton hosts every year? The Artru Cyan, to honor their military veterans?" she asked, brushing her hair from her face as it ruffled in the breeze. "I should," he said, "since I'm one of them." She nodded and continued. "Master Card took all of us to it, and that was the first time I'd seen the dance that the Knights do for it. Jared told me that the Knights and many students from the Darha school perform it. He also said it was common for the Darha school to issue a challenge to one of the other schools in the area. That didn't happen this year." She paused and grinned at him, about ready to burst. "A few months ago, after the festival, a messenger from the Darha school came to the Praxium to present the challenge from his master, to Master Card." "Darha," Jarius whispered as he looked down and smiled for a moment. "I bet the place hasn't changed at all. So, who took the message to them?" Marin grinned. You're looking at her. I volunteered, and Master Card sent Bran with me since he knows the area. She looked at him for a moment. You didn't tell me you'd studied there. Bran told me when he saw me playing with your tags. I didn't know. Darius looked at her for a moment and nodded. I guess it wasn't the first surprise you had that day either. Naish, it wasn't, she said quietly, fingering his tags again. I haven't kept up with my studies of the written Katani, so Bran read your tags for me. He said that you achieved the rank of Master Sergeant and that you're from Edmonton. She paused. He seemed shocked that I didn't know about it. She then slipped her fingers into his. He told me... Whoops, sorry. 1 second. He told me a bit about your past and how you resigned. It was hard for her to talk about it now, and she clung to him. When we got to the Darha school, he had us go inside a different way, and he led. He seemed intent on introducing me to the school's master, though I couldn't figure out why. He said you were a person of some importance and that he had to introduce me to the master. And when he did... Jarius was grinning, thinking of memories from that time. You met Colonel Talon, didn't you? Marin nodded. Alec, I did. I like him. I didn't get a chance to tell you before, but he said that... And she closed her eyes, remembering the message before she recited it. Let him know that an old friend has been worried about him for a long time and that his home is still open to a visit. It brought a smile to Jarius' face as she told him the message. I guess I had gotten solitary in my ways, he said as he leaned forward and sighed before patting her knee. Marika, I'm sorry I hadn't told you everything about me, that you've had to learn it from others instead of me. I'm sure it's brought up some more questions, too. Marin nodded, and she chewed on her lower lip before she looked up at him again. Beware, from what Bran told me, when you found out that your Rajur had been killed, you went after the Kirtzad, and you killed them. Her voice caught in her throat, and she felt her lower lip trembling as she remembered. She knew he could kill when needed, but that was unlike the man she knew was her father. He closed his eyes hard, not knowing what she might be thinking about him. But, he told himself, better to talk about it now than later. Aye, he said softly. I started hunting them down, every single one that I could find. He got up and started to walk around the tree as he continued. Whether they were part of the group directly responsible or not, they were Kirtzad, and that's all that mattered. I went on for weeks, or longer. I was so absorbed in killing them that I didn't know what it was doing to me inside. It was like a voice inside my heart, encouraging me. I could feel it grow stronger with every one of them that I killed. His voice caught momentarily as he leaned back against the tree. When Ethan and Card found me, I wasn't the same person who found you, Dalgad. I realized the monster I was becoming. Marin's lips trembled and tears traced down her cheeks. She felt his anguish, the horror at what he'd started to become. She then reached out and gripped his hand, not letting go. Jarius looked around as he sat down next to her again. It took me a lot of time with Master Card to get through the feelings I had, to shed that anger I held in my heart for so long. We spent much time here instead of at his home, so you could say that I was the first of his students here in this place. She smiled and leaned into his shoulder. Something had been nagging at her. After a moment, she said, With how hard you hunted them the first time, what's to keep them from finding you? He nodded at her concern. It was many years ago. If they know I'm still alive, I don't know. When Ethan started to show me the Mandalorian way, I had shed most of who I had been. If they do or don't, it's a small matter right now. They'll know soon enough. Marin frowned. Beware, you're not going after them again, are you? He shook his head. No, not the way I had before. Zan told me that they were active again, causing us trouble, so I've been quietly looking into what leads came up and what I had discovered when hunting them before. But no, I'm not on the warpath for them. She released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and snuggled into his shoulder. I'm glad, she said softly. I wouldn't want to lose you. She sat like that for a few moments, calming herself, and then she looked up at him. He asked as he looked at her, seeing another question in her eyes. She smiled. I was just wondering if you wanted to go see the Colonel, and I haven't told you about the challenge yet. Well, he said as he got up, first, my good news, and then you can tell me of the challenge. You have good news? She asked curiously, sliding off the bench. Well, I've decided that since things look well off right now, he hesitated and then grinned, I can take some time out for a month or so. Master Card has already offered me quarters, but I was going to see if he wanted to go home for a while or stay here so you can continue your studies. I can't English today. And I'm actually going to stop right there because we have an ad starting in less than 10 seconds. So I'm going to do my best to not read during the ads. So take this minute and a half, get some water, get a snack, have a stretch. I'll see you in a minute and a half. Oh my goodness. Well, the ad should be starting, if it hasn't. It's gonna make a liar out of me. It'll make a liar out of me. There we go. It always takes like 5 seconds. Oh. Sorry for the extra noise. I have snacks, which are in noisy containers. Goodness, I didn't realize how noisy those were. Sorry. Alright. Should be back in 20 seconds. Alright, and we're back from our ad. Thanks for sticking out through that ad break. Unfortunately, I don't have any control over the fact that we have them, so I appreciate when you guys hang around. Ads do help support the channels, along with subscriptions and bits and other things like that. I never ask for subscriptions. I do appreciate when you can. Like I said, they do help support the channel, so it's much appreciated. Alright. And I had to find my spot again. Alright. Marin paused to consider that. I'd like to go home, but I promised Master Card I would stay. She grinned at him and then threw her arms around his neck, joy at his announcement flooding their bond. I've missed you so much, and I always wished you would stay and train a little. Well, he said, looking over at his pack, making her wait for the rest. She narrowed her eyes and punched him gently on the arm as her gaze followed his, straight to his pack. Her eyes then widened and she looked back at him, her mouth agape. He was laughing now. He talked me into it, he told her with a grin. Marin squealed and threw her arms around his neck. Kandosi! I was given the old shed off the other side of the grounds, he said as he pointed to a section where a small building was. It has an old forge there, so we can use it for a project you and I must attend to. Marin's eyes widened and she gasped. You mean that? She stared at him as his words sank in. Does this mean I need to move out of the student quarters? No, he said as he looked back at her. You've settled in quite well, and I wouldn't want to disrupt that. No, I'll be here to learn some, and maybe we can do some more work at the forge and such. She grinned at him and plowed into him in the next instant, engulfing him in a hug that threatened to cut off his air. She then buried her face in his shoulder, mumbling, Vore. It took him a bit to get used to being in the Praxium and among so many for an extended amount of time, but Jarius had taken it in stride as he settled in on a routine for the short time he would stay. He was up sooner and traveling farther on his runs than the students were. He'd also taken time to continue additional exercises and practice, both on his own and with Marin. What took him the longest to get around to was further instruction with Stefan, just the two of them, per his request. Jarius had been feeling his focus drifting lately, especially with his activities leading him closer and closer to finding information concerning the Death Watch. Inside, that voice from years before was starting to whisper again, to reawaken the monster he had been before. That was the main reason he had returned, to seek additional instruction from Master Card. As it was now, he sat alone close to a corner of the main hall, his back to the doorway from the courtyard. He was sitting in a meditative posture, going through the technique that Stefan had taught him to bring himself into focus and to find a peaceful center. He registered several students passing through on different errands and practices on their own. Some would stop to look and see what he was accomplishing, and he registered surprise when they did. He paid it no mind. Hadn't they seen someone meditating before, Mando or otherwise? What didn't register was that while he was attempting meditation, he had also awakened another part of himself, which he was only partially aware of. Jarius was slightly floating as he meditated, and several objects were also floating around him. Yet, he failed to realize what he was unconsciously doing. Stefan had told him that he could detect faint traces within Jarius connecting him to the Force, but Jarius never took it in thoroughly. He was firm in his path, and the hunches and feelings he'd always gotten were just that, faint traces, but now it was slowly awakening. Sure, Marin missed the time she could have spent with Jarius at the Praxium. She was glad he was finally beginning to start some training. She wasn't exactly sure why, but he had insisted that his training be private and separate from the rest of the students. But she could guess. For one, he was a lot older than the majority of them. She shrugged and smiled as she made her way to the courtyard. She'd just returned from the morning run. What she saw as she stepped into the courtyard made her stop in surprise. She stared. Jarius sat in the corner of the courtyard, his back facing the training circle. She was used to seeing him meditating lately, but what surprised her was that he was floating. And not just him. The pack that he usually carried was floating too. She stood there in amazed silence for a long moment before she ventured quietly across the courtyard to where he was and sank onto the bench just behind him. She tucked her feet up quietly and stilled her mind using the technique he had taught her so long ago. She found it calming and reassuring that he was close by. He registered Marin behind him in her surprise as she approached and sat behind him. He still couldn't understand the surprise of seeing him meditating, but new thoughts suddenly became apparent. Sounds of blaster fire. A lot of it. There were sounds of explosions, and he felt a sudden sense of pain within himself, and sorrow. It felt just as strong as it was within him when he'd lost his family, just as a sense of anger and pure, unadulterated vengeance started to make itself known. But it wasn't coming from him. It had come from Marin. He opened his eyes suddenly at this revelation that had come to him, and then the full effect of what he had done began to register as he felt like he was falling, and he fell hard to the paving stones of the courtyard. "Spast!" he muttered as he started to rub his knee where it had impacted the stone. He looked then and saw his pack lay differently than when he had sat there to begin his practice. Just what the hell had he done? Marin opened her eyes at the muttered curse and slid off the bench. "Beware, are you all right?" she asked, gently touching his injured knee. "Let me help." He turned to look at her in a new light now, knowing what he had sensed. "I'm okay, Marika," he said as he got up and walked around. "Just how long were you behind me on the bench?" "I don't know." She frowned for a moment as she thought about it. "Maybe 15 minutes? Why?" He shook his head as he looked around again. "Did you move my pack? It's not how I left it." Marin shook her head. "Naish, I didn't. You did." She grinned slightly at his confused expression. When I came into the courtyard, I saw you meditating, but you were floating, and so was your pack. What? Jarius looked at her incredulously. Marika, you aren't joking with me, are you? Marin shook her head. You know I wouldn't. She pointed and held her hands a few inches apart. You were about this far off the paving stones. He looked at how far apart her hands were, still feeling the twinge in his knee as he looked to where he'd been sitting. His only response was a slightly surprised look as he sat back on the ground and leaned against the bench. I never would have thought it possible. Marin smiled and scooted off the bench to sit beside him. If you can do that, I guess it's like me learning the fourth form, she mused softly. After a moment, she frowned. Buer, what did you feel in meditation? When you first saw me, you looked at me rather oddly. I'm not entirely sure myself, he told her as he rubbed his eyes, but I think I probably need to discuss this with Card first. She frowned in disappointment and nodded, and then she was quiet for a moment before she asked, Are you hungry? It's time for the morning meal. That I am, he said as he slowly got up. Oh my goodness, sorry, the congestion is killing me right now. And I don't want to mute the mic because it's going to mess with the closed captioning. Sorry. Wow. Oh, killing me, man. Okay. Another dream? Stefan asked as they talked alone, walking through one of the covered walkways around the Praxium. Not this time, Jarius said as he looked towards the forest outside. No, I would have to say a premonition since it just happened while practicing the meditation technique you taught me. Stefan nodded and listened to everything Jarius told him about what he had seen and felt. I'm concerned at how soon this has come to you, he told Jarius as he thought about it. It sounds like what you told me just before Marin started training here. I remember what you said about it then, Jarius answered. It has come and gone since then, and I have not dwelt upon it, but have thought about things that needed doing in the here and now. Some additional training might help me, as I'm trying to be here for Marin. She has felt more upbeat with you here, Stefan noted, and I can attribute that to you being here. She's missed you quite a bit and has had to learn so much about you rather quickly. The revelations she received on the way to Colonel Talon's school were such a surprise to her. I'm almost disappointed you didn't confide in her about who you once were. It's a mistake that I have attempted to correct, Jarius said as he turned around. At any rate, Stefan, this is where my concern lies. He sighed as he turned to look at the master again. It felt like it would be soon. Before Stefan could reply, Jarius started feeling his comlink vibrate before it began to emit a specific pattern. Expecting a call? Stefan asked. Not through the ship's communication circuit, no, Jarius said as he pulled the comlink from his belt and keyed it on. Yes? I hear you're still looking for Danos Duran. The voice he couldn't place, but the name instantly had Jarius' attention, and he had to suppress the feeling that came up when he heard it. Stefan knew the name and was as on alert as Jarius. I've not looked for him for some time, Jarius said cautiously. But you're still looking for Deathwatch, the voice said calmly. Yet, it still sounded like the person it belonged to had some ulterior motive in mind. When you're not spending time on Catan lately, that is. That got a reaction out of Stefan. Whoever it was, they had been keeping track of Jarius' movements. You have the advantage, Jarius said. He was starting to get irritated. He hated games. What do you want? I can tell you where they're operating right now, the voice told him. I might even be able to bring them to you. I'm listening. I have a text-only message waiting for you. It will include instructions on where to meet me. Stefan began shaking his head. Jarius understood it too. There was no way of knowing if this was a setup to catch him, or worse. I'm not too thrilled with the idea of walking into a situation I don't know, he told the mysterious caller. Oh, sorry. The place would be of my choosing. I don't have the opening to hop around to a different location, the voice returned, agitated. I have them located, and I only have 3 days before I lose them. If you want them, you'll meet me. The link cut off, and Stefan stood there as Jarius looked at the comlink and put it back on his belt. You know this is a trap, Stefan said. I know it is, Jarius replied with a heavy sigh. 3 days. That means it'll take me that long to get there if I leave now, or it'll give me time to scout the area. I would probably think the former, the Jedi said, but it is a trap. Whoever this is, knowing you've been here between contracts and your search for Deathwatch, he knows that you went to look for Duran and probably knows to some extent of the killings you went on to look for him. Either way, Jarius said, it's an opportunity I don't know if I can pass up on. It is too good to pass up on, Stefan commented. Exactly. That's my point, Jarius, Stefan told him. You know this is probably a setup to get you into position to be cornered and possibly killed. What were we talking about just before he called? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. Give me water. Alright. I know. Foreshadowing much? Oh my goodness. Oh dear. Yeah. Like I said, you might want to bring tissues. Let's try that again. There we go. Yes. Dun 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 indeed. Suspense. That's not the end of the chapter. Not quite. Jarius had been at the Praxium for nearly a month, and Marin enjoyed having him close by. She'd missed him terribly in the months he'd been away. She was glad he'd opened up a bit more about his past. She sighed and scuffed her toes on the paving stones as she crossed the courtyard. He never did tell her why he'd looked at her funny the other day. She sighed. He'll let me know when he's ready to, she told herself. It only made her feel a little better. It took a few minutes, but she finally reached Jarius's quarters. She pushed the door open and stepped into the cool dimness, blinking as her eyes adjusted. Most of the space was taken up by a large forge. Over in the corner there was just enough space for a cot, but it was what was on the cot that caused her face to crease into a frown. His pack lay on the bed, and she could see some of his tunic sticking out. She glanced around looking for him. Why would he be packing? He'd said he'd had a couple of months. Buir, are you here? She called, after a few breaths to try and calm herself. Here, Jarius said as he came around the corner, checking the blaster he usually wore, before holstering it on his thigh as he went over to close his pack. Marin wandered over and sat down on the edge of the cot, frowning. Buir, where are you going? I thought you'd be here for a while. I thought so too, he told her, closing his pack. I was talking with Master Card when a call came in. An unknown source contacted me through the ship's comm circuit and said I had a small window of time to get a hold of certain people I've been looking for. Marin frowned. The only people he'd go after like this was... Her eyes widened. But you promised! You said you'd be here! She drew her knees up on the cot. Who is it this time? She asked, her tone a bit sullen. He looked at her, suddenly worried about how he would answer this, but she deserved a straight answer. He finally set his hands on his pack, sighed, and looked directly at her. Kirt Zod, he said quietly. Her eyes widened, and she stared at him. You said you wouldn't. She suddenly remembered her concern from over a month ago. He'd brushed them off then, but... You promised me you wouldn't. This is not about revenge, he told her as he looked squarely at her. Deathwatch has been causing a lot of trouble, and there's been a standing order to find these people and take them out. I'm going to scout it. She knew that tone. There was no way she could talk him out of it. Something nagged at her, but she didn't know what it was. So you're going. It wasn't a question. She slid off the cot and pushed towards the door, turning to hide her tears as she shoved it open. She didn't care if it was a standing order from the Mandalore or not. Marin, he called, turning to get her attention. She ignored him and pushed the door open the rest of the way, hearing it fall shut behind her as she took off across the courtyard. Jarius turned to follow and left the door open as he walked into the courtyard behind her. Marin! She heard him, and as she turned to look, her tear-blurred vision caused her to stumble. She was just inside the archway leading to another part of the monastery. She fell and barely caught herself. Slowly, she sat up, her back against the side of the passage. She heard him coming, calling for her, but she didn't move. He started to pick up his pace until he caught up to her and pulled her into his arms as he knelt. Marin. She was sobbing now, and she shook her head violently at him, tears choking her voice as she pushed free of his embrace. There was no barriers between them as she let her fear for him flood their bond. She didn't know where it had come from, but a cold feeling had settled in her gut when he'd mentioned it. Her voice bounced off the stonework as she yelled, "You promised!" She turned away then, sobbing as she took off again. It made his heart sink, feeling the anger and fear in her voice, her tears and their bond. He stood and looked at her as she stormed down the walkway and headed to a different part of the grounds. It took all Jarius had to keep from sighing heavily as he walked back into the room he'd been using and picked up his pack. Maybe if he left a note behind. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Also, yeah. By the way, if you guys want some ambiance music for this next chapter, go look up Back to the House That Love Built by Taito and Tarantula on YouTube, and then Battle Without Honor or Humanity by Tomoyasu Hoti. Let's see. There we go. That's a mouthful. I'm gonna get some water, because I'm apparently losing my voice, kinda. Alright. Chapter 23. Jarius pulled up the message and started to read over the details as soon as he secured the ship. The contact was actually in Katani space on the outermost colony. To Jarius, it made sense. It was the only area in Katani space where smuggling activity was common, because the planet was at the system's edge. Ships were able to jump in and out under cover. It didn't impact the rule of law much and was seen as a trade booster, so most authorities only noticed it if a dangerous situation developed. Sorry. Hi, Tama. I've been busy, okay? Oh, man. How you doing, Tama? Sorry, I've been, like, super focused. And with Deathwatch there, he thought, as he started to input coordinates and set a few ID overlaid. Wow, let me try that again. I can't words. It's getting intense, apparently, because I can't English. Let me try that again. Oh, man. Okay. If I can do this without coughing, that would be great. And with Deathwatch there, he thought, as he started to input coordinates and set a few ID overlays to his transponder frequency, it's decidedly more dangerous, and the fleet probably doesn't have a way to check traffic to know they're there. The good news was that with the route he plotted, it was only a few hours away. This would give him a larger window to scout undercover and assess the situation before the 3 days were up. Yeah, it's getting pretty intense. Sorry. He landed and had no trouble with port control as he settled with them on a rate for the docking berth. He had his Beskar gown covered under a cloak and his helmet on, clipped to his belt to keep it out of sight. The cloak's hood covered his face as he went through the crowd, going through the local vendors as if he were just another passerby, but his eyes were scanning the area and checking everything. When he reached the cantina that the contact selected for the meeting, he looked it over from the outside, going down the side streets to see if there were any additional exits that might be there. If there was anything, he learned, it was to never go into a place he didn't know how to escape. And that's when he saw one. It was a single person coming out the back. He was in full Beskar gam, and Jarius could just make out the symbol on his shoulder plates. It was the Deathwatch brand, no mistake. Jarius tailed him from a distance, keeping an eye out for more. This one was walking tall and proud as he went down the street. It wasn't Joran. The armor wasn't in the colors Jarius remembered seeing him wear, but he was getting a feeling that this one wasn't alone. He stayed with him until he saw his target looking at foot traffic, scanning carefully before he went through the doorway to a warehouse. Jarius was on the other side of the street when he saw it and stayed there, sipping on a cup of caf from the cafe he'd picked out as he'd seen the Deathwatch member slow down. A cursory look at the building didn't reveal much. Later that night, under cover of darkness, he was back, yet again. This time he was on the roof, without his cloak, and his helmet scanners active, going over every bit of the building. It didn't look promising to defend against any assault. It wasn't typical, and it concerned him as he went and swapped to scan for life forms. That result intrigued him, for he picked up multiple life signs throughout the building. Deathwatch was here, and in force, too. Now, the question was how he was going to approach this. It was midday when Jarius decided to move head-on into the cantina. Just another person decked out in armor and helm was no new surprise to the clientele as he moved through the crowd. Deathwatch may have frequented this place. He had a specific table listed in the instructions he had gotten and saw a cloaked figure sitting there waiting for him. "You came earlier than I thought," the person said as Jarius approached. The voice was starting to sound more familiar. The person gestured for Jarius to join him at the table. "I don't have time to waste," Jarius said as he stood, ignoring the request to sit. "Give me the information you have. I already know where they're skulking at. Tell me if Danos Duran is among them." "Patience, patience," the person said, smiling under his hood. "I would have thought that old Jedi Master would have taught you some patience as much as you've been in his school lately." Jarius slammed his fist on the table, knocking over the man's drink. "Harchak, I've no time for games. You called me here. Is he here or not?" "Oh, he's here, all right," the figure said as he stood slowly. The hair on Jarius' neck was starting to stand on end. "He's been here the whole time," the figure said, pulling his hood back to reveal his face. It was Danos Duran himself. "Kijakad Kish!" he shouted. Jarius heard the shuffling behind him and saw several cloaked figures standing. They threw their cloaks aside to reveal a fully armored Deathwatch. "Blessed Lady above, I walked right into it!" Jarius' first reaction was pure instinct, and his blaster came up of its own will and fired a double-tapped shot into the closest one right above the top of his chest plate. He turned to aim with the next, and he felt Duran's arms wrap around his neck in an attempt to hold him at bay. A second came up with his carbine rising to ready position when Jarius thumbed a control on his gauntlet and fired a stun web. It entangled the man, and he was in the way of the other's line of fire. Jarius took the opening and drove his elbow back into Duran's side several times before reaching for a thin blade and driving it between Duran's plates. He yelled as his right hand dropped to the wound and drove his left elbow down onto Jarius' back. Jarius responded by bringing his helmet up and smacking Duran in the face to knock him backwards. Sorry, I'm really bad at ready combat. Jarius wasted no time turning to fire another series of shots into the tangle of body and cloak. By this time, the other patrons were running for the main entrance, and the bartender ducked behind cover, frantically hitting the emergency call for the local authorities. The other Deathwatch members were spreading out, taking pot shots at Jarius as he turned to see Duran gone, and he looked up to see the back entrance starting to close. "Have a present for me!" he yelled as he pulled a concussion grenade off his belt and thumbed a control for a 2-second delay before he ran for the back door. He threw it at his attackers as he crashed through into the back alley, scrambling out of the way. 2 seconds later, the force of the explosion hurled the door off its hinges and against the opposite wall. Jerry shook his head and looked down the alley to see Duran already a fair distance down the street, and other Death Watch members appeared behind him. Okay. Oh, darn him. He swore under his breath as he slapped a fresh power pack into his blaster and drew his ripper with his left hand. All right, you've been asking for it. Come and take it. There wasn't going to be any quarter now. And I'm going to stop right there because there's an ad starting in less than 10 seconds. And I need water, so... Oh, man. And I'm slouching. If you see me slouching, please yell at me. Alright. Thanks, Tubba. So a little bit of background before the ad starts. So this story and the next one, actually this story and the next two were actually co-written. So I've been doing a lot of editing to kind of clean them up a little bit, so the grammar might be a little janky. The ad should be starting any minute now. Yep, there it goes. There it goes. We have a minute and a half. Get a drink of water, have a stretch, have a snack. Thank you, Ray. Yes. Crazy, huh? Oh, man. Alright. Yeah, no kidding. Thanks, Rusty Tools. Oh, man. Crazy talk. Okay. And we are back from our ad. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you guys are enjoying the story. It's getting kind of intense, and I'm apparently losing my voice a little bit, so just bear with me. Yeah, it's getting pretty intense. So, yeah. Alright. Oh, goodness. Suddenly can't see. Hold on. Alrighty. I did eye drops, I promise. I just can't see. Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. My goodness. Excuse me. The door opened almost too easily when Jarius kicked it in before he waited around a second or two. It had been a running firefight to get this far. The Death Watch members had been challenging, but he'd already taken down several, and the rest decided to hole up here. In a way, it confused him. He didn't see any way to make a good defense in the building. He stayed to the walls as he went inside, his helmet scanners going over every bit as he checked around the room. He had both of his blasters drawn as he moved slowly forward. I knew it would only be a matter of time before you started to look for us again, he heard from somewhere. It wasn't Joran, for sure. It was Joran, for sure, taunting him. He moved his head slowly to the left, scanning through the building, but not picking up any sign. Ah, Jarius, you fought so well today. It's a shame that you didn't accept our offer. You would have been useful to us over the last few years. Jarius couldn't help himself anymore. Did I look like some rogue guildsman that you felt you could sway to the Kirtzad? He finally asked. I knew your outfit was running short on brains, Joran, seeing as how I killed so many of them, but thinking that you could get a Katani Marine to join your ranks? Ha! You must have been short on brains that day. He knew his taunt would bring out a few out of hiding. One popped out from around a corner and tried to surprise him, but took a shot to the neck right under his helmet, dropping to the floor. A second attempted to take him by surprise, but Jarius ducked under the man's shot and fired into the man's hip. When he hit the ground, Jarius rammed the end of his blaster under the man's helmet and fired again, seeing the orange glow through the visor. Yes, he heard inside his mind. It feels so good to pull that trigger again. Jarius shook his head, knowing exactly where it came from. He forced the dark intent out of his heart as best he could and looked around as he went between the cargo crates. You're not going to be able to hide in here forever. Hiding? He heard from the corner of the next crate. The hair on the back of his neck prickled as he turned the corner with his blasters leading the way, and saw a metallic box with a speaker attached to it. As soon as he turned, he saw another object start to blink with a few flashing lights, beeping as it did so. Along with it, he faintly heard more of the sound, all around him. Who said anything about hiding? Came Duran's voice from the speaker just as the beeping stopped. Marin, I'm sorry, were his last thoughts. The entire warehouse ruptured from the explosion, sending chunks of permacrete that made up the outer walls through the surrounding buildings. The shockwave blew out transparent steel windows for several blocks around the building as a solid wall of flames went through the streets. On top of one of the buildings, far enough away to see the explosion but not feel the effects, Danos Duran stood from where he'd been crouched and tossed aside the comlink he'd been using to broadcast his voice. So long, Jarius Sturza, he said as he turned to walk away. One less problem to worry about. I'm just gonna let that sit there for a minute. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. And I'm the one that wrote it, okay? I'm just gonna let that sit for a minute. That was chapter 23, by the way. Okay. Alright. You guys ready to continue? I don't know how I feel about that. Oh boy. Give me 1 second, I'll check something. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I may actually read chapter 25 just because it kind of tags on to what's happening. Okay. Whew. You guys ready? I don't know if I am. And I wrote this thing. Alright. Oh, goodness. For proper ambience, okay. There we go. Chapter 24. Catan, Card Residence, Stefan sat up quickly from his sleep, his eyes focused yet distant as he was trying to figure out what had just happened. Could it have been love? Jade asked, awakened by the sudden movement and turning to look at him. Stefan, what is it? I'm not sure, he said as he tried to focus on it more. It was Jarius, and then he felt the sudden jolt of agony, close from the direction of the Praxium. It spurred him into motion, and his feet went into his moccasins next to the bed as he closed his tunic and started grabbing his equipment belt with his lightsaber. This got Jade's attention, and she was up soon behind him. Stefan, what happened? She asked as she reached for her nightrobe. She could feel the urgency now as well. I think something bad has happened, but I'm not sure, Stefan said as he started to go down the hall. Contact Dylan at the cottage and have him get a horse for me and one for himself, ready to go as soon as I get there. The Praxium. Marin thrashed beneath the sheets in the darkness of her room, lit only by the pale rays of moonlight. She saw Jarius, but she couldn't pinpoint where he was. She felt a flash of red-hot anger from him such that she'd never felt. And then a few whispered words were consumed as the area he was in exploded in a ball of flame, smoke, and shrapnel, before shooting skyward. Her eyes snapped open. She lay there, her legs tangled in the sheets as her body became drenched in a cold sweat. The whispered words seemed to echo in the sudden stillness of her room. Marin, I'm sorry. She reached out, trying to sense him, and there was nothing but a black void. As that fact sank in, she let out an inarticulate scream. She didn't care who she woke. She drew her knees up to her chest, her fingers closing into fists as she wrapped her arms around them, trying to muffle her sobs. Jared, not even bothering with etiquette after he'd heard her scream from down the hall, slammed her door open and saw Marin drawn up and crying. He didn't know what had happened to cause this, but his first instinct was to sit with her as he wrapped his arms around her shoulders. On the trail, Stefan had his mount running at full pace, with Dylan close behind him as they went along the trail as fast as they could. Other students had rushed down the corridor to Marin's room, and only Bran and Koya parted the group and walked in to see Jared holding her. Great force, Bran whispered as he saw the look in Marin's eyes. What happened? Marin sat huddled on her bed, and her blue eyes were like the void that now filled her soul. She flinched when Jared touched her, and she started reaching for her knife before she realized who it was. She clung to him then, her hot tears soaking his sleep tunic as she cried into his shoulder. She didn't even notice the other students. She was still trying desperately to find Jarius through their bond within the Force, but she couldn't. As that fact settled in her brain, she sobbed harder. There were more footsteps down the hall, and Jared could hear Master Card's voice calling the students to return to their quarters. He could also hear Dylan's, making sure they did so as Stefan walked into the room. He was in his sleeping pants and the loose kimono of his Jedi attire, but his belt was on with his lightsaber riding low. Marin, he said softly as he sat opposite Jared. Marin, you need to tell me what you saw. Slowly, she lifted her head from Jared's chest. Her tears had soaked through his light sleep tunic, and the tear streaks glistened across her cheeks. She tried to breathe, but it was as if a fist had closed around her heart. She was sure Master Card had seen the look in her eyes, but she honestly didn't care. She took a few gasping breaths and tried to speak. She couldn't. She shook her head at him and then seized his hand, dropping her shields. She barely had control. Stefan brought his hand up slowly. Marin, will you let me see? He asked quietly. She nodded wordlessly and clung to Jared's hand with her left, her right closed over Master Card's. She took another breath, and Jared could tell that she was struggling to maintain control. After a couple more breaths, she nodded, but her grip on Jared's hand didn't listen. Stefan gripped her hand and brought his other up to her temple, gently placing his fingers against her cheek and forehead before he lowered his head. His eyes closed. He sensed and went through the images she had seen, and when he got to the explosion... Sensei? Bran asked as they all moved closer. Stefan had slumped from the feeling that had entered his gut when he'd seen it. He slowly pulled his hand from Marin's head and looked off to the side, sorting through the images of what he'd seen. We have no way of knowing if this is real or a premonition, he told her quietly. Do you understand? Marin pulled away from him as if she'd been slapped. It's real, she said. I can't feel him anymore. At all. Before Stefan could say anything else, a beeping sound started to go off in a specific pattern. He looked to Bran, who began to look around for the source of it. Bran then reached over to Merrin's belt hanging from the chair and pulled her comlink. As he held it out, it continued to beep in a distinct pattern. What is it? Bran asked. It almost sounds like a beacon call, Stefan said as he looked from the comlink to Merrin. Merrin paled and then swore, using a word she never would have, one Jarius didn't know she knew. She fumbled with the small comlink as she took it from Bran, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the thing. She brought it up to eye level, staring at the small display. When she looked up at Master Card again, her eyes were swirling with agony and anger. She hefted the device in her shaking fingers. This comlink was linked to one of Buir's. It was programmed to activate should something happen to destroy its mate. Her jaw hardened. If that were to occur, his ship would lock onto the signal from the remaining comlink and go to wherever it was. Could it be that just the comlink is damaged? Bran asked, offering some glimmer of hope. Merrin shook her head. Nesh, see for yourself. She tossed it to him, and it slapped solidly into his palm. It was dense and heavier than it looked, a combat model, one designed to take a beating. It doesn't damage easily, as you can see, and it would take a lot to destroy it, she finished. Stefan listened to all of this silently before standing. Dylan, Jared, with me. Bran, Koya, stay here with Merrin until we get back. Yes, Sensei, Several said as he leaned over to give Merrin a long hug before he started to leave and head down the corridor. Sensei, Jared began to say as he caught up with Stefan in the corridor, I think that I need to stay here as well. And you will, in a moment, Stefan said as he turned around. Jared, I need you to keep a close eye on her. I don't know if you noticed, but there was anger in her eyes. I felt it, Master, Jared said quietly. I will watch over her. Good, Stefan said as he sent him along, and then looked at Dylan. Stay here and see to the other students. They're also concerned because of how she had awakened. Yes, sir, Dylan said as he began to move, and then paused. Where are you going? I'm returning to the house, his father told him as they walked on the corridor. I need to get in touch with Zan or Ethan, or both. We need to find out where he was and what the hell happened. Merrin heard their hushed conference in the hall, and her fingers curled into fists again. Oh, she tried to calm herself, but the flame that was her agony couldn't be extinguished so quickly. She looked up again as Jared came back into her room. The comlink still rested in Bran's hands, and Jared reached out. Will it keep humming even if I shut off the alarm? He asked, as Bran handed it to him. As long as it's on, she whispered, pulling it from Jared's hand with the force. When it thunked into her palm, she played with the controls for a moment, finally killing the screeching alarm. An indicator light still blinked insistently, but that was all. She stuffed it into a pocket, reaching for her weapons belt. Regardless of what Master Card had said, she couldn't just sit here. Wait a second, Jared began, as she reached for her belt. Merrin, what are you doing? Merrin looked at him and shook her head. I can't stay here, Jarika. She almost choked when she said that, for it was the same affectionate form that Jarius' name had taken. She knew she still had clothes aboard his ship, so she didn't bother dressing. Instead, she buckled her weapons belt over her sleep clothes, her fingers closing around the blaster on her left hip. Please don't try and stop me. She also focused on Bran and Koya before looking back at Jared. Stop you? Jared asked as he came up close and held her tight. Merrin, this is no time for... Merrin looked up at him, the fingers of her free hand brushing his cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered. In one smooth motion, she drew the DE-10 and flicked the selector to stun before she turned off the safety. She aimed the blaster at Koya and pulled the trigger. He was wreathed in a blue haze as he fell to the floor. She then did the same to Bran, even as the boy moved towards her. She fought against Jared's grip, knowing he was trying to calm her. Turning back around, she jammed the blaster's emitter into his ribs. Please don't make me do this. Jared looked into her eyes, not bothering to keep the hurt in his own from showing. With her blaster jammed against his ribs, he wouldn't have a chance to draw his saber to deflect any follow-up shots. But he still held one hand on her shoulder. even as she fought under his grip. "Marin," he whispered, "don't do this. I don't want you to go down this path that you're thinking." Marin bit her lip, and tears glistened anew in her eyes as she looked up at him. "He was my life. I have to do something." She leaned up on her toes and kissed him tenderly, her left hand shaking. "I saw what flashed in your eyes," he said as he traced her cheek. "This isn't a path I want you to take, one you don't want to go down. Please, Marin." Marin's lower lip quivered and she closed her eyes briefly at the touch. "I can't just sit here. I need to know what happened. His ship will have records." "Let Master Card see to this," Jared told her. "He'll know how to handle this. If you do this alone, you don't know where it may end." Marin sighed in exasperation. "It will take too long." She pulled the comlink out and looked at it. The ship was getting close. She stuffed it back into her pocket and looked up at him again. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered, tightening her grip on the blaster again as she pulled free of his. Tears traced down her cheeks because she could see how much it hurt him. "You're not leaving me much choice," he told her. "I'm sorry, Jared," she whispered, tightening her finger on the trigger as her vision blurred from the tears. Jared could sense Marin's intent to go down the path. He felt like he had no other option remaining as he called up a force hammer to separate them before she could fire. As soon as he landed opposite, his silver blade was already alive in his hand. However, his thumb was down on a second button. He'd fashioned his blade with a concept he'd seen in the notes that Stefan had given him. The second button powered down the blade to stun if needed, and not cut. Marin stumbled as she was shoved away from him. She knew he'd be able to block her shots. How could she get past him now? She looked around the room and spied the open window. Shoving the DE-10 back into its holster, she pushed the window open further with the force and jumped onto the windowsill. With one last look over her shoulder at Jared, she closed down her presence and leaped, arcing gracefully to the courtyard below. Jared was fully prepared to block her shots, but Marin's jumping out the window was as much a surprise to him as anything, until he couldn't feel her presence anymore. He knew Master Card had been instructing those who could hide their presence from others, and he wasted no time shutting down his blade and sprinting down the corridor. "What was that noise?" Dylan asked from the opposite side as he saw Jared running down the hall. "Marin stunned Branda Koya," Jared said as he sprinted, Dylan following close behind. "She's intent on discovering what happened and going after whoever's responsible on her own." They both reached the courtyard, and Jared knew she could be well outside the walls of the Praxium by now. As he ran and leaped up to the outer wall, he stretched out his senses as far as he could and couldn't help but utter how he suddenly felt. "Marin!" he yelled into the night sky, the pain in his voice unmistakable. I gotta stop because I need water. I know. Oh my goodness. Oh, geeky redhead, I know. Seriously. Oh. Super sad. I know. I mean, kind of. Oh, you caught that, did you? Yes, we stole that. We stole that. Yeah, totally stole that. Okay. You know what? Give me one sec. I'm gonna... let's see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're nerds. Sue us. Oh, man. Okay. Every time I read that entire sequence, I'm, like, bawling. Every time. I'm surprised I got through it without, like, completely losing composure. Because every time I read it on my own, I'm a total mess. So, yeah. There's certain sections in various of the stories that will do that to me, but if I can kind of evoke that kind of emotional response from the reader, I think I'm doing my job correctly. So, okay. Okay. Everybody ready? No, that's not gonna happen. No. Goodness. Okay, water. I may go a little bit longer. I'm considering reading chapter 25 just for continuity purposes. We'll see how it goes. Alright. Everybody ready? I'm not. Okay. Deep breath. Marin stopped dead when she heard Jared yell her name. The pain in his voice tore at her heart, but she turned away and towards the sound of approaching ship engines. She knew that the Katani patrols wouldn't stop at Jareis's ship. He was known here. She continued through the forest for what felt like hours, going on pure instinct. Suddenly, above her, she felt the warm wash of the ship's repulsors. Pulling the comlink from her pocket, she pressed the button in a short sequence. The hatch slid open, and she leaped to it, palming it closed from the inside. She stumbled to the cockpit, collapsing in the pilot's chair and staring at the controls. Something in her gut told her she couldn't leave yet. Reaching for the navigation controls, she input the course for the clearing Ethan had used all those months ago. At least she'd be undisturbed there for a bit. Long enough to formulate a plan. Okay. Listen, Dylan said as he joined Jared on the wall. Jared closed his eyes and focused on his hearing for a long moment. Engines, he said quietly. Jared's ship, perhaps? Could be, Dylan said as he surveyed the landscape beyond the walls. It's too far away to see any glow from the sublight engines. Maybe using repulsor lifts only to keep out of sight. Spast, Jared cursed as he kept looking. He wasn't going to stop on this. Is there an extra horse here? Just mine, the older Jedi answered as he tapped his shoulder and gestured for the young man to follow. But that doesn't mean we can't ride together. Come on, we need to tell Father what happened. Okay. Yeah, this is getting intense. For a long moment, Marin stared out the transparistile viewport, watching the bulky shadows of the forest pass by below. She was keeping low, only a couple 100 feet above the treetops, to minimize her chances of being spotted. After several long minutes, the navigation board pinged. She'd reached the clearing. Cautiously, she studied the scanner, slowly easing the ship down to rest on its landing gear in the clearing. She could feel a faint pulse of worry from Jared, bringing hot tears to her eyes yet again. She swiped the back of her hand across her face, leaving a damp streak across her cheeks. She then moved into the galley and started a pot of beehot before heading to her cabin. There, she stripped off her sleep clothes, laying her weapons belt on her bunk before she grabbed a towel and ducked into the fresher. The hot water washed away the salty tear streaks and the grime, but the pain still remained. She sighed heavily and leaned against the cool tile of the fresher stall. Force, it hurt. She did what? Stefan asked as he turned around from looking out the window of his study. He was still trying to get in touch with Zan and Ethan. He was still in what he had thrown on earlier, while Jade had already started calf for him and whoever else would be called upon for the situation. Catherine was still asleep, but Renius was now helping his mother with things in the kitchen. She drew her blaster, stunned Bran and Koya, and held the weapon against me for the longest time before I pushed her away, Jared told him. Master, she's overcome with anguish and anger over what's happened to her father. I couldn't talk her down from finding out what happened and going on her own to find the ones responsible. Griff, was all Stefan whispered as he thought about it. Any idea where she might have gone? I have none, Jared said, shaking his head. She jumped out of the window and shut down her force presence. I couldn't track her. Father, Dylan said, we thought we heard a faint sound of ship engines. Could Jareis's ship have covered the distance in that long a time? We don't know what modifications he might have made to the ship's propulsion, Stefan said. What concerns me is two things. First, if it's here this fast, how close could the Death Watch be if he was tracking them as he told me he was planning to? And second, Marion's sudden decision to take on the path of vengeance and how well she's been able to conceal herself from even you, son. Remain here and keep trying to contact Master Canadius and Ethan. Jared, wait here for me to change and prepare. Then we'll find her. I'm going to actually stop there and get a drink of water because we have an ad coming up in about 30 seconds anyway. Whew. Yeah, like I said, have tissues handy. Thank you. Much appreciated. I could probably use a snack right now, actually. I'm not gonna lie. Hey, Wraith, you want to do the snack command for me, please? It's exclamation point snack. That too. That works too. It's actually a command though, I think, still. Okay, what do you guys want? Should I have mango? Or should I have, apricots? What do you think? Mango? Apricots? What do you think? Apricots? Mango. Mango? Okay. That was not open yet. Alright. I'm trying to be healthy with my snacking. Okay? I'm trying to be a good example. We have an ad starting anyway, so it'll give me a chance to snack. Wow. I love dried mango. Good choice. I like apricots too, but mango is better. Yes. Yes, indeed. I think both have vitamin C, actually. But yeah, lots of vitamin C. Good stuff. As I try not to choke. Yeah, that's good too. And now it's all sticking to each other. Oh goodness. There we go. Okay. We're gonna be an ad for another 50 seconds. Get some water, get a snack. Have a stretch. Okay. Alright. Alright. Oh. Excellent timing. I just finished my snack. Cool. Alright. Get a little bit of water. Alright. So here's my next question. We're almost done with chapter 24. You guys want me to stop there? Or do you want me to continue on to chapter 25? It's your choice. It's gonna make the stream longer, which, I mean... Woo. Well, I've got another handful of paragraphs. And about 20 minutes left to stream. So... Wraith, when do you gotta go? Sir Wraith, when do you have to leave for work? Are you here? Okay. Let me take a real quick look at chapter 25. Oh, actually 25 is not super long. I think I can manage that. Okay. Not super long. I can manage that. So, I should actually finish it by, a little after 9. No, it's fine. It's okay. It's okay. Don't apologize. Alright. So I just looked at chapter 25 and it's not super long. So I'm actually going to fix this. Oh my goodness, sorry. There we go. Alright. Alright. Okay. I had to find my spot again. Alright. You guys ready? Here we go. Alright. Music's being a little funky. Okay. Whew. After several long minutes, Marin shut off the spray, wrapping the fluffy towel around her middle before she walked barefoot to her cabin. She pulled a clean coverall, socks, and underwear from the drawer and dressed quickly before she stepped over to the far bulkhead, pressing her thumb to the reader hidden within. The panel slid aside as lights flickered on. Inside the hidden closet, she had stored a completed set of Beskar gam in the same color and design as her partial set. There were also backup weapons and spare power packs. She grabbed her boots and pulled them on, lacing them up quickly before pulling on an armored vest especially designed for the plates to attach to. It kept the upper body armor snug against her. Then she started with the boot armor, strapping it on before she moved to the shin armor, and so on until she began attaching the upper body armor to the vest. Next, she pulled on a close-fitting hood to help keep her hair out of the way. Then she stuffed a pair of black armored gloves into her belt and stocked her pouches with fresh power packs for the DE-10s. With that done, she grabbed her helmet and returned to the galley for her behat. Oh, if you guys have Twitter or X or Blue Sky, please feel free to use that link. I don't have Twitter. But if you want to share that we're reading, please feel free. Okay. Right. Stefan climbed up on his horse, Sundancer, and waited for Jared to mount up before he took off towards the Praxium. When they reached there a short time later, Stefan asked Jared to point out which wall Marin had gone over, and they rode up to the spot. Stefan stopped and closed his eyes, drawing on the tracking techniques he had known since he was a young boy, and started to understand the direction Marin might have gone. In her trial against Ethan, she'd done well to avoid detection as she had, but Ethan was not a fully trained and experienced Jedi Master, and Marin, though she had learned her lessons well and quickly, was not one either. Stefan caught a glimpse through the Force and looked down along the line that he felt was the best route. "We're going to have to be careful, and we can't use the mounts," Stefan said as he dismounted and started to go along one of the trails. Jared not far behind. There were several game trails and bare signs of some newer ones. She could have taken any one of them. Stefan started in the direction he'd indicated to Jared, his senses stretched out and alive as they began to search. The back of Marin's neck prickled, making her reflexively reach for her blaster as she took one final swig of the warm liquid in her mug. Carefully, she set the mug down in the sink and pulled on her gloves, hefting the helmet in her fingers before she slipped it over her head. As she did so, she heard the faint hiss as the helmet sealed. Blinking twice, she activated the helmet's built-in uplink with the ship. Again, she felt the faint warning tingle. Someone was focusing on her. She closed her presence down even tighter, sprinting back to the cockpit. Could she get the ship off the ground before they got to her? She frowned and shifted her eyes left, bringing up the security system. The clearing around the ship was free of movement. For now. She increased the scanner range to the edge of the trees and locked down the outer hatches. That ought to slow them down a little bit. But what of Ethan? Where was he? Oh, no! No! Faith, no! Timing. That's okay. You can watch the VOD later. That's why it's there. Have a good night, Wraith. Alright. Chapter 25. Mm-hmm. Give me 2 seconds while I fix something. 2 seconds. Okay. Alright. There we go. Chapter 25. Father? Stefan lifted his wristcom and keyed the channel. Were you able to reach them? Zen and Callista will be delayed, but Ethan can be in the system within the hour, Dylan told him. What do I need to do? Stefan thought about it for a few moments. How well did Jarius train Marin to fly and use the ship? He had no way of answering that. If he had wanted to, he could have used Blue Talon's scanners to cover the entire forest in a fraction of the time. But he didn't want Marin to feel like she was being hunted, or even for the wrong reasons. Get Viper to prep Andrew's X-Wing, he finally answered. Lift the launch pad to the surface and stand by for my signal. Contact Ethan again once he gets in system and have him standing by in orbit around Catan. I'm unsure how he will respond to this, but I want him close if I need to bring him into play. Yes, sir, Dylan said, and he cut the channel. Does any of this look familiar? Stefan asked Jared as they stopped to get their bearings. I believe it does, Sensei, Jared answered and then closed his eyes and thought back. She passed through here during her trial, he said as he pointed to an open area. Around there is where she had used her knife on the wolfhound. I had come out here to retrieve it for her. I think I know where she might be then, Stefan said as he looked in the direction he was thinking. Come on, we don't have much time. On board Tresinia, Marin carefully brought the systems back online, one at a time. She'd left the engines on standby so they'd be ready to go if she needed. Again, she checked the passive sensors. Something pinged on the long-range screen. There was movement, but slow, as if the person was on foot. She swore. Only a few people could track her that accurately. It had to be Master Card. Her gloved fingers curled into a fist as she gazed at the viewport. If she was going to go, it had to be now. Stefan held his hand out to pause Jared. She's powering up, Jared said out loud, not bothering to keep quiet. She'd know someone was here already. Come on, Stefan said as he broke out into a run. Dylan, he called on the wristcom, get airborne, now. Marin swore under her breath, the tingling at the back of her neck turning into a silent scream of warning. She sat up, rubbing the back of her neck as she brought the engines out of standby, her fingers hovering over the repulsor lifts as the scanners went active. Tresinia heaved upwards as the repulsor lifts kicked in at half power. She was trying to clear the trees before she kicked in the sublights. Dylan brought the old XJ3 model up smoothly from the landing pad and kicked in his own sublight engines. He already had a navigational fix on Stefan's comlink, and he followed the course towards the signal when his forward scanner started to pick up a ship coming up from the forest. Stefan reached the clearing as the ship rose above the trees. He only had one other option, and it was a long shot as he thought about it, pulling a small disc from one of the pouches on his belt and throwing it with the full power of the force to get it to attach to the outer hull. Jarius would have detection gear aboard for such a thing, but Stefan was playing every card he could. Dylan, I've placed a tracking beacon on the ship, but she's out of my range on the ground. Keep up with her, but do not assume an aggressive posture, understand? Copy that, Dylan said as he kept the S-foils in cruise mode and switched his comm to an open frequency. Tresinia. The security system warbled insistently, jarring Marin back to the present. She squinted at the readout that flickered across her HUD. A tracking beacon. And again, but this time it was a small craft, just now crossing the outer edge of her sensor envelope. The scanner identified it as an XJ-class fighter. Her eyes narrowed. Trying to herd me back home? She muttered under her breath as she kicked in the sublights to half, clearing the forest canopy as she pulled for space. It was strange, though. She wasn't reading active weapons on the XJ. Why? Don't do this, Dylan whispered as he threw the throttle to full and started to close on Marin's ship. Viper, see if you can see what frequency she's on. I've got it on an open channel, but I don't want this to go out to everyone. Once you have it, send it to Ethan if he's in position. Confirmed, Viper told him as he worked on it. Dylan switched the channel over as he slowly closed in. Marin, this is Dylan Card. Do you read? Marin kept a steady grip on the flight controls even as the comm icon blinked insistently in the corner of her HUD. It was coming from the X-Wing. She kept the channel open, keeping a close eye on her sensor readout. What do you want, Card? She asked, rather bluntly. She wasn't in the mood to talk. Here to talk me down, are you? She coaxed a little more out of the sublights, opening the gap a little as she climbed higher into the atmosphere, and watching as it slowly gave way to the utter blackness of space beyond. Well, it's your decision, Dylan told her honestly. It's either me or Ethan at this point. Marin blanched. As if it matters. I've lost the one person who was everything to me. I can't let that go unavenged. They killed him simply because he wouldn't do what they wanted. He was nothing but a loose end to them. Her voice was a low growl, but there was a hint of tears also. She side-slipped, trying to open the gap even more. Dylan muted the channel for a moment. Viper, put everything you can into the engines. He then unmuted. Marin, please think this through. Jarius was a well-trained Mandalorian and a Katani Marine. You are not in any condition to face them alone. Marin swallowed. There was a long silence on her end of the channel as she pondered that. I can't let his death go unavenged, Card, she whispered. She yanked hard on the flight controls, rolling Trasinia off Dylan's course as she pulled away from Catan. And I never said you had to, Dylan told her calmly as he matched her move for move. But it wasn't his voice that chimed in next. But now won't be the time. I should say it better not be. Ethan's voice chimed in. By the gods, Dalk, I'm not going to be saddled with burying both of you. Marin flinched as if Ethan had slapped her. She opened her mouth to respond, but then simply closed it. There was another long silence on as Marin side-slipped again, watching her sensor screen. Dylan was pacing her, and she spotted Ethan's D5 Mantis just off her starboard as he closed in on her course from behind Katane. You're not ready for this yet, girl, Ethan told her. You may have outfoxed me, but there are more of them. A lot more. Ethica, I can't let this go, she choked out. Even over the comm channel, the pure pain in her voice was unmistakable. It felt like her heart had been shattered. She dropped below their flight path, looping beneath them. The sublights were maxed out, and she dared not coax any more out of them. Marika, Ethan told her, we're not going to let this go. But if you go out like this, right now, on pure cussedness and anger, you're going to go down a path Jarius has already walked. And it's one you have no business walking. Your heart knows that. Marin bit her lip hard enough to taste the metallic flavor of blood as she tried to keep from sobbing. She rolled ship again, pushing the sublight controls wide open as she headed for the other side of Katane. Pincer her, Card, Ethan said as he stayed behind Marin's ship. Dylan curved his flight path and started to swing around to the other side of the moon. The concern on Dylan's mind at this point was that this chase would get the Defense Force's attention. Valkyrie's third battle group was in the system for refit and crew leave, and all of their ships were at docks around Katane, and her fighter squadrons were on the moon's surface bases. Marin swallowed as her grip tightened on the flight controls. Her sensor board pinged and she swore, rolling to port as she saw what lay on the other side of Katane. She did not want to tangle with the Defense Force. Not now. She came out of the roll, leveling onto a new flight path as she pulled away from the moon. All right, Ethan said as he painted Marin's ship in his crosshairs for a moment. Turn the ship around, and I might just go easy on what I've got to say. Marin paled beneath her helmet as the target lock sounded in her ears. She swore under her breath, feeling sweat trickle down her scalp as she weighed her chances. She flexed her fingers momentarily before she rolled ship away from the target lock. Blast it, Dalish, Ethan said as he inverted, adjusted his angle, and painted her again with the target lock. There is nothing that you can do. You go this route, and there's no telling what kind of trouble you will find yourself in. Do you understand me? Marin cursed in frustration, knowing she couldn't evade forever. They were better pilots than she was, and she knew that she was too close to Catane's gravity well to risk engaging the hyperdrive. She sideslipped again, knowing she was only delaying the inevitable. Ethan shook his head at her stubbornness. All right, he grumbled as he applied 5 degrees of port thrusters, if this is what it takes. He applied more power from the port thrusters and waited until his crosshairs were several meters from her ship before firing 2 rounds off her starboard. Marion swore and rolled the ship away from the shots, but that took her back towards Catane. She slammed her fist into the control console, well clear of any controls. It only made her feel slightly better. Ethan stayed behind her and kept his finger light on the trigger. Now, he started to grumble, are you going to finally listen to those of us who know what we're talking about? Or do I have to aim a little closer? Marin swallowed. She sighed and then swore softly, loosening her grip on the flight controls as she moved out of his line of fire, but it was slower this time. What was that? I didn't hear you, he said over the comm as he pulled up just aft and to her port side. Marin was sweating. She could feel it trickling down the back of her neck. Nas, she said quietly, ensuring her weapons remained offline. She only wanted to lay the hurt on the people who had killed her father. No one else. Now, I know what you want to do to those people, Ethan told her, but we do it when you're ready, and you're ready when I say you're ready. Talibak? Alec, Etika, was her quiet response. The anger was still there, as was the agony. Now, Dylan is going to form up on your port bow. MasterCard has already activated the beacon for their landing pad. We are all going down and landing, and then we will all have a discussion. Marin swallowed hard. Something about his words made her wary. Understood, was all she said, her voice quiet as she oriented her ship towards the beacon. And we're going to stop there. Because it is almost 9 o'clock on the nose. We're going to stop there. So, how are we feeling? How is everybody feeling? I'm a little, I don't know. How is everybody feeling? Wait, are you guys okay? It's getting intense. Sorry, I did warn you to bring tissues. Sorry. I hope you guys are okay. I'm surprised that I'm not a mess, because usually when I read that whole section, I'm just a complete mess. Hope you guys are doing okay. But yeah, we're gonna stop there for the night, because it's 9 o'clock. I appreciate you guys so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed. I know it was really intense. I'm sorry. Really sorry if I got you super wound up so you can't sleep. Massive apologies. Try and take some deep breaths. Go get a drink of water. Take some chill time. This is supposed to be chill time. I'm sorry. Also, I will have some news for you guys at the next stream, hopefully. It's good news. So hopefully I'll have some news for you guys. And actually, I will have news for you guys. So I'm excited about that. I can't tell you yet because it's not like fully official, but super excited. So I will have news for you guys at my next stream, which will be, let me double check actually. Wow. Goodness. 1 second. Oh yeah. So my next scheduled stream is supposed to be Christmas Day, but I should be home for that. I will let you guys know. We're still sorting out family Christmas stuff, so I will let you guys know. But as far as I can tell right now, I should actually be home for that. I know that it is Christmas Day, but I do, if I'm able to be home and able to stream, I'm going to do that so that you guys can have some chill time if you need a break. It's going to be SWTOR, so we won't have any more emotional roller coasters for another 2 weeks. So, give you guys a little bit of a break that way. And my plan is to make a new character because we reached our $350 goal for Starlight. So, that's my plan. And I am going to take a look at people who are currently streaming, see if there's anybody that we want to go say hi to. Let's see. Alrighty. Do you have crazy timing? Let's see. You know what? Let's go say hi to Shan Chen. She is a traditional and digital artist here on Twitch. She's fantastic. She's really awesome, and she does great artwork. So we're gonna go say hi to Shan Chen. I have rated her a few times before. So give me just 1 second while I get that sorted. Okay.
Wow, that's a person.
Okay, give me just 1 sec, guys. I'm still sorting this out. Oh my goodness. So not a professional at this. So, for those of you who are subscribed to the channel, the exclamation point raid command is for anybody who's subscribed. And then raid 2 is anybody that is a follower of the channel. I would appreciate if you guys can tag along for that raid and say hi to Shan Chen with me. She's pretty amazing, and she's her art is pretty cool. She did my logo that's down here in the bottom right of my screen, actually. And she also did my BRB screen. Well, the cute derpy Mando cat on the BRB screen. Speaking of which, let me show you that before we go. That's the BRB screen that I'm talking about. That one right there. Thank you so much for being here tonight, everybody. I appreciate you. And I hope you have an awesome night and a great the rest of your week. Please take care of yourselves. Make sure that you're getting plenty of rest, plenty of water, vitamins if you're sick, and take all your meds. All of that important self-care stuff. And because I'm going to go do that in just a minute, actually. And I will see you guys next stream, hopefully Wednesday. I will let you know in Discord if that changes. And hope to see you then. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Not dead.
And just because I can, reminder to myself. Good night, guys. Have a good evening and get some good rest.
How dirty. Where? Wish we could have more than 4 people. There's customers, Oh shit, we can actually make corn now.